Okay, so we are back for our final session and our final speaker for today. And the topic now, we're now moving to the topic of AI and fact-checking. And as you've probably already understood from the other speakers here today, generative AI is one of the main challenges and the main sources of uncertainty facing fact-checkers and journalists and everyone who works on the information ecosystem today. And it's uncertainty in two different directions. The first one is about how it can be used to create misinformation, something we don't know what scale that might take on eventually. But there's also a different kind of uncertainty, and that's how useful generative AI and other similar technologies will be for the people trying to make the information ecosystem a better place. And one of the people working to do the positive thing is Gaute Kokkvoll, who is the head of product at Factiverse and also one of the partners in NORDIS working on technology to that purpose. So please, Gaute, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Gaute Kokkvoll, and I'm head of product at Factiverse. My background is from technology, but in fact, my first startup was actually within this field of misinformation, and it was called Demand the Source, and this was back in 2014, so before Donald Trump made fake news cool. But yeah, always been very passionate about kind of this intersection of technology, media literacy, or can we use technology for good? And today I'll tell a little bit about how Factiverse came to be and how we've been working very closely with the fact-checking community, particularly through NORDIS and the Nordic fact-checkers to really develop and look at, can we use AI more of a tool or more to make fact-checking more efficient? So as I mentioned, we've been very focused on media since we started. Actually, Factiverse came out of research from University of Stavanger that started already back in 2016. So Vinay Sethi, who's CTO of Factiverse, already back then looked at kind of this concept of automated fact-checking. Can we speed up this process, some of this manual, tedious tasks of verification? But yeah, very big focus on working with the professionals. It's always kind of interesting coming with technology and kind of forcing it into a field. But I think what we've been very focused on since we started is actually being with fact checkers, being with journalists, really seeing where are the pain points, where in the workflow can we actually save some time as opposed to forcing yet another thing on the journalist or on the fact checker. So yeah. Big focus on pilots. We're very much like arms and legs, as we say in Norway. But I would say over the last couple of years, particularly, and very much so through NORDIS, we've actually been able to really pin down and do some services and products that I think, and hopefully that you'll see can assist the fact-checking work. So today I won't spend too much time on the overall issue because I know all of you here are very well familiar with this. Just pointing on some few things that we see now from NATO review, actually pinpointing that cognitive warfare is now a term and a risk that they are putting on the agenda. So it's not necessarily. So when I started, I remember the fake news stories in 2014 was like, there's more bacteria in your beard than on the toilet seat. And that was like that was fake news in 2014. But now it's obviously a lot more quote unquote weaponized. It's a lot more potential to do more. And also more harm in that sense. And this goes in many different parts of AI and also kind of this generative space. Much more new challenges appear, and it's probably also going to be now for the next and already for this year, we're going to see kind of some of the more risky parts of this development happening. But I think what we're talking about is digital trust, right? It's kind of how can I make sure that we can trust each other or that we can have some common grounds. And it's not only like the trust part itself, but I just this is one of my favorite statistics after ChatGPT was launched. But it's basically that this is the amount of books since the printing press was invented. But now every second week, the output from ChatGPT is nearly double of this. So just imagine going on Google now as opposed to January 2023. It's actually going to be exponentially more difficult to find useful information online. So it's not necessarily only about quote unquote dis or misinformation. It's also just the information overload becomes much more difficult, not just for consumers or companies, but also for fact checkers to really stay on top on everything that's going on. A little bit like this. So at Factiverse, we started very early on to look at what parts of the fact-checking workflow can we assist. And our first front end you can see here is basically a bit like Grammarly for fact-checking. You have any kind of text that you input. We scan through the text to detect factual statements. We identify those statements, and then we do a real-time search across the web, trying to show you the most credible references supporting or refuting any of your claims. So we're very wary of not becoming like a gatekeeper for truth. We are a tech company, so we'd rather give you the full overview of what's out there, and then as a journalist, as a fact checker, or as a consumer, you can still do your own thinking. But what I think is most fun to talk about here today, and was very much a project from NORDIS, is the ability to kind of speed up, because a lot of fact-checking work is kind of reactive. But after Thomas from Tjekta this spring reached out and asked our tech team if it was possible to do real-time fact-checking of a EU Parliament debate in Danish. And I said yes. And then I asked Vinay, and we worked on it for, I think, 2-3 days to get some very clunky front end up and running. And Thomas and his team actually had a solution up and running for several of these parliament debates. And I think good experience. I mean, this is very hacky start. But what we saw is that using AI in this sense, where it's not necessarily trying to replace the fact checker work, but rather be more of this kind of support. Because once a debate is going, whether it's radio or political, it's a lot of things happening at the same time. And for a journalist, and even when you're more journalists on the team, just getting a sense of what is the most important parts of this, what was actually said by which candidate, and be able to have some sort of tool to backtrack this. So that's basically the solution we set up. I'm going to see if I can maybe play this. No, say. So basically, this is from the last presidential debate in the US. We had a lot of fun doing real-time fact-checking on these ones. But basically, what you can see is one interface with real-time stream. We do real-time transcription, and then we pick up factual statements from that transcript, do a real-time search across the web, and we can give you kind of a preliminary fact check as, is this statement supported or is it refuted? And again, it's all like preliminary verification, I would say. And what's been very interesting for us, especially working with Tjekta and other fact checkers in the Nordic Faktisk as well, is that we see that often it's not necessarily having this real-time interface that has the biggest value. It's actually being able to bring this data to life after a debate has finished. So imagine you have 5 different debates going back the last month, maybe 5 of them in radio, 10 in TV, and you need to kind of, what was the sense, what was being said? So what we had a big focus on now is actually kind of bringing more of that data back to journalists. So you could be like, give me all the claims from Joe Biden on climate change over the last 3 debates, and bam, aggregate that type of report. Or say, as a fact checker, you're coming into the office in the morning and you basically have a daily digest showing you, this is all the most disputed claims coming from radio debates or TV debates yesterday. So we're kind of now looking very much where can we assist fact-checking workflows, and where can AI kind of have more impact as opposed to creating more extra work. So you can double check this with Thomas afterwards, but even with Danish, we were able to catch quite a lot of the debate of what was being said, and we're now going further to look at, can we detect speakers better? Can we bring in more historical debates? Can we bring party program, other databases in one interface, so this work can be even sped up further? And maybe it could be like a election database at some point where you could really deep dive as to see how has claims within different topics changed over time, maybe from different parties, from left to right. So if you're kind of looking into this field, we'd love to stay in touch as well. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions as well. We did some tests also on Norwegian this fall, and it was actually quite fun to sit in the debate and watch the debate going and also the fact check in the same time, like a second screen experience. So we'll see if we're doing some more stunts to push this also out to the general public. But yeah, from just to round off, we don't do any generative AI at Factiverse. So, and that's also interesting to see that models that are specifically trained on, say, claim detection or prediction of veracity, we see that we do a lot better than the large language models on this kind of specific tasks. So when people ask like, will we have like this one massive AI tool? I don't really think so. And I think a lot of the LLMs out there, they're actually adding things to your workflow today. But what we see with more specialized models, we can actually eliminate some of these tedious manual steps. Yeah, wide team, big focus on media, I would say, since the beginning. And the NORDIS project has definitely been of massive value for us as a tech company, really understanding the pain points of journalists and fact checkers. So feel free to give a try at our service. And if you want to have a chat with me, feel free to reach out as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gaute. I think we now have time for actually quite a few questions if people in the audience would like to ask something.
Yeah.
You need to wait for the microphone so that people on stream can hear as well.
Hello, thank you. My name is Øyvind Slotto. How to make sure that your sources are not getting polluted?
Yes, that's a very good question. And so we basically not done any retraining on public data. So we started out in 2016, we started with the IFCN, International Fact-Checking Community data set that's been vetted up to 2016. And it had around 200,000 certified fact checks. So they had like very transparent sourcing, all of them have an author, etc. So basically what we did was take that data and we trained our model to look on similar traits when it's doing a real-time search. So we're not just fetching results from Google when we search there, we're looking kind of with the eyes of a fact checker. Does these references have external references? Have they been maybe referenced by other fact checkers historically? Have they been referenced on these specific topics previously? So we're trying to bring in more of that kind of context, but it's a very big issue, I think, for especially if you want to retrain the model. So we've been very wary of not touching any of the public domain data to bring that into our training.
Thank you for a very interesting speech. I was wondering, because some of the previous speakers talked about the pollution of our information environment.
Yes.
Looking into very odd, maybe a little bit true stories that are bursted into the European information environment. So detecting that kind of strategy from, for example, Russia, in order to destroy the way of life in Europe. What do you think about that? Is that a new business opportunity for you?
Yeah, I think in a sense, it's a very good question, and I don't think I have a definite answer to it. But what seems to be, or at least our approach so far, has been that working on bringing in more of the contextual views has been a much better solution for us. And I think you at Faktisk as well, you have approached kind of verification work more towards just being transparent of the methodology of getting to that answer, as opposed to saying this is true or this is false. And I think we could also potentially do the same, whether it's, a narrative that suddenly appeared on X maybe last week, as opposed to us analyzing that specific claim. We could say that, this claim appeared from 100 X accounts last week. And maybe that would actually give you a better indication as opposed to us saying that claim is true or false. So I think it's very much bringing in more of that more useful context as you're doing a search or as you're researching. Yeah.
Thomas von Schechte. Just to follow up on what you said and the question before on the pollution of data.
Yeah.
What perhaps should be emphasized is the fantastic thing about this AI tool is that it is able to detect claims. And this means if you have a 7-hour-long debate, or it could be even this conference, that it looks through those 3 hours, who is saying something that could be a claim.
Yeah.
And then it makes a preliminary fact check. But what is important to say is, of course, this is not what we base our article on. When this system has made this fact check, the ordinary research process that we always use, the methodology, then takes into force. That's important to say. We don't publish anything directly, of course. A question for Gaute. What's the next step using AI?
Yeah, I think what we've been working on now at Factiverse, actually my colleague, he published his article last week, but it's going into kind of this not necessarily agent-based fact-checking, but we're looking at this question-based approach. So as instead of us picking up a claim, searching the web and kind of finding support or refute for that claim, we're actually picking up a claim and then we're asking actually a large language model, what questions do I need to ask for me to verify this statement? And we have some very interesting findings that seems that it's actually getting more of that context that sometimes we as humans tend to forget. So I think in that space, it's going to be a lot of interesting stuff happening. And I think otherwise, it's also going to be a lot of focus on this live setup, maybe like supporting fact checkers more on a day-to-day basis, where you can have like, you could set up maybe monitoring of certain political fleets or channels, and then basically say on a daily basis, get some insights. Maybe that would be a database at some point as well. But it will be developed with fact checkers and journalists. That's for sure.
There's at least a question from Mikko, and maybe some from the stream as well.
Thank you, Gaute. And just curious on the wonderful pilot you made with the CheckDet on the European parliamentary plenary debates. Don't you see there is a huge potential in view of the, let's say, next European elections where we should prepare, because that's where you could keep the politicians accountable, just like recording and scraping all the things, and when they're coming back to that. So, and in the presence of the European Parliament, as I see, so I mean, this would be really something where the AI could work for us. Yeah, no, that's really what I want us to be working on for the next years. And I mean, even though we're kind of in the super election year now, there's so much more coming up. And just like you're saying, like the historical context can also be quite valuable, I think, for fact checkers. Yeah.
There's one. I think we have one question from the stream.
I'll just read it out loud.
We can hear you, Jacob.
Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't realize I was given the word. Yes, it's Jakob Lolk from the European Parliament. I had a question regarding these EP plenary debates. I was a bit confused because it said May, June 2024, but there were no plenary debates in that time period. So what exactly was it that was being live fact-checked?
It was the Danish EU Parliament debate. I think it was end of May, the first one or so. TV debate. Yeah. Okay. So then, that was a good question. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Plenary would work if it would be in the plenary.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and we're actually there's a Romanian presidential debate tonight that we're doing live fact checking on. But was just a small note on there was some good questions about kind of this garbage, or that the data is getting worse, right? And I heard this analogy that like the golden era of data is over now from 2020, and it was a little bit when they did the first nuclear bombs in the 40s as well. It had an impact on the steel production worldwide. So everyone wanted the low latency steel, which was produced before 1940. And those become the most valuable. And you can see that now all the big platforms, they're more careful of sharing their APIs and want to protect their data. And it's kind of a similar, like the data up until 2020 is the most valuable. And since then, it's just much more difficult to make use of it. But it's a very interesting time. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
There is actually a final question.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. I was just wondering, have you done any user research on this? Like how do fact checkers find using it, and how can you show that it's kind of effective?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I would say continuous work. And we started on this this spring, so still quite early. But I think like some of the things that you mentioned as well, Thomas, like just being able to detect claims You know, when we started, it was like, oh, here's this whole funnel of fact checking and everything. But then we saw, okay, just getting timestamps and the transcript, maybe with the detected statements, was actually helping fact checkers even more than we thought initially. So I think that's continuously that we're seeing this. Oh, okay, this can actually speed up some of that manual, because we want to make sure that the journalists and editors, fact checkers, that they are still in control. But a really good question. Thanks.
Thank you, Gaute, for oh, there's actually even more questions. Very good.
Not really a question, just to support your experiences that we also had. If we take a look at one of the 1.5 hour TV debates, usually we would be like 4 journalists sitting in front of the television and listening in, and still that is even difficult. I think the system detected on 1.5 hour over 100 claims and even more. My sense, as I remember it, was around 80% were actually worth looking into. But some of them, a lot of them, we had to say this is not important enough for the political debate, so we'll let it pass. And others, we were able to conclude this claim that the system found is actually interesting, especially if the research that it points to is correct. So that's how it was very important, a good assistant in our work.
Thanks.
So no more questions. Wow, this was maybe the most questions we've had. So thank you very much, Gaute, for the presentation and for answering people's questions as well.
Thanks a lot.